Hi, welcome. This is Gigi Haycock. I'm a programmer at the festival, and welcome to the 21st SF Doc Fest. You have seen the film, Sign the Show, and we are so happy to have with us the director, Kat Brewer, and a cast member, but also a government advocate for the deaf and hard of hearing, Julie Rems Smario. And thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, to start off, Kat, it's for you. I was wondering, how did you become involved in the signing community and learning about it and making this film?
Yeah, so prior to making this film or just starting with the idea for this film back in 2014, I didn't have any connection to the deaf culture or the deaf community. But I'd been going to concerts since I was 8 years old, and fast forward 30 something years. And in 2014, I attended a concert, and for the very first time, I saw a sign language interpreter signing for the patrons that were there who were deaf. I started talking to the interpreter and then communicating to the deaf patrons through the interpreter, and found out that um, deaf people love live entertainment. I was completely ignorant. I didn't understand that at first. And then when talking with them, I learned that just like hearing people, deaf people enjoy live entertainment, but they face a lot of challenges and barriers to getting access to it. So I decided I was going to write an article for the college newspaper where I taught, and then a friend suggested that I make a documentary, and so I did. And it was at that point when I started reaching out to people who are in the deaf and hard of hearing community for interviews. That's when I started to become connected and realized I really need to learn sign language if I want to be able to better connect with people on a deeper level. And I'm still learning. I am not fluent by any stretch of the imagination, but Julie has been so patient with me when we're together. And it's just been wonderful to be able to connect and communicate and to be able to share the stories of this community with the world. Like I'm just the conduit for their stories.
Now, it takes another dimension to your communications background too. Now, if you're, bringing that into what you've already been doing, it seems like now that's kind of been, flourishing a little bit more.
I'm definitely more aware of not only the language, my first language, English, but also more aware of the opportunities and potential connections that I can have and bridges that I can build with another community that I really didn't know anything about, but I'm so happy to be connected to now.
Yeah. How did you and Julie then meet exactly?
Julie and I connected. There was a gentleman that I met at a concert one time, and he was deaf, and I interviewed him. His name is Ken Arcia, and Arcia, and he was like, "You need to interview my friend Julie." And I met Julie at her house in 2015 in Hayward, California, and we've just it's weird. We hadn't really seen each other again after that interview until the Santa Fe Film Festival in February of 2022. But from that point on, we've just been connected and really enjoying working together with this film and on other things as well.
Yeah, that's great. And Julie, you have you're on the board, I believe, of Deaf Hope, as well as your work with the Northern California Early Language and Education Program, LEAP K. Can you tell us a little bit about those organizations?
Yes, yes, it is. I'm involved in both of those organizations. I would like to tell you a little bit about the LEAP K organization. It is the Language Equity for English and ASL. So really any language that is used in a home, and we're looking for equity there, and language equity acquisition for deaf kids. And that's what LEAD K stands for. That's the acronym. Because really the point of that is the idea of a child having access to language from birth to 5 for early intervention in and then be ready for kindergarten. So Kat's film and Kat's work is really about the idea of access to language and the accessibility of communication. And of course, access is not, limited to birth to 5, but that is the what we would call the critical period of language acquisition. And then that leads to academic and social successes and pretty much the rest of somebody's life. So with Kat, I was really happy to have the ability to focus on the access to events and entertainment, and especially the areas of the arts. We have this idea of the human connection through art and the arts in general. It really is that medium that provides the human connection, and to have access to those arts really does bring the deaf community into the society as a whole. And that was really the goal. So that's kind of how we connected and what level we connected on.
Oh, that's fantastic. Is this a somewhat new kind of, the attention that's put on the deaf community and getting them early on so that they haven't had the struggles maybe that people have had, prior to this?
It's really not a new initiative. It's been something that has always been a challenge. When I was born, my mom, who is from Spain, her first language is spoken Spanish. So when she found out that she had a child that was deaf, the very first thing that the doctors told her, they got an audiologist. It was a physician and an audiologist. They said, stop speaking Spanish and do not learn ASL. If you can imagine. So, that was already a problem even, when I was a kid, and even prior to that, going back 100 years, that there was this feeling and this paternalistic attitude about ASL being less than a language. So it's something that we've struggled with, changing that and making people aware. So if you can imagine just having access to the arts being this additional connection, and the idea of having an interpreter. So it's really not a separate issue. It really is the idea of having that attitude or that paradigm shift, that we would have access to the world in our natural language. And, the idea of having this like discrimination against ASL was already happening for people for a very long time, and even for babies when they're born. So, that's why I'm really invested, in the birth to 5, that critical period, that all children would be able to get both sign language, ASL, and spoken language too, if they desire written and writing English themselves. And we'll have to have these linguistic opportunities for them so that they're able to internalize, acquire, and then have their own language acquisition process, just like anybody else would. So right now, it was actually pretty much last week in Los Angeles, their school district, the LA County School District, and the board just finally voted unanimously. It was 7-0, so unanimously on the board, that they passed a new resolution for the school district that will recognize American Sign Language, ASL, as a language of instruction equal to English being the language of instruction, ASL being the one for deaf children. And this is really the first time ever in the history of the state of California. So it was a huge and monumentous event, and something that was, I would say, a watershed moment for the deaf community.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. Yay.
Yes, yay.
It's my first one in low. I like it. This is so inspiring on so many levels. And I've been noticing more and more signing. However, I don't think I've ever been to a concert or anything where I've seen that. And what grabbed me when I started watching this was the animation of the people who are signing and interpreting, I guess, is that the better way to say it, is interpreting? It is. Okay. So interpreting. And then as the film goes on, you really get to learn a little bit more about the nuances of that, because I was thinking, well, do they know the lyrics, or, and it's so good to hear that that there are people who are having, like Chance the Rapper, and having people who kind of tour with them. And so they understand. But it made me really realize, if you don't, what the pressure is on the interpreter for having to just be brought into a situation where they are not familiar with it. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that, from having talked to those people. Yeah.
Sure. It's so interesting to be speaking about an interpreter's experience when we have an interpreter, but Holly is here to really provide access to this whole interview. So from my understanding, it is really best if a producer of an event or an artist of an event reaches out with plenty of time for an interpreter to prepare to interpret at a concert. And there's various nuances to that. As Holly discusses actually in the film, sometimes patrons want like exact English. Sometimes they want more of an ASL structure, and English and ASL have a completely different grammatical structure to them. And so, depending on who the person is receiving the access, they may want something a little bit different. So if there's enough outreach and advance time to prepare, an interpreter's job is so much easier. And another interpreter brings up the fact when an interpreter is requested, especially for like a concert, maybe 2 nights before or a night before, there's really no possible way for them to learn the entire, repertoire of a band's, music, especially if the band has been around for 10 plus years, right? And they've got like 30 hit songs. Like, it's hard to be able to study and learn how to interpret those songs in a way that is best serving the patron who is there for the access. So we're really trying with this film to put the onus on the producer, on the promoter, on the artist to request access, to put it in their rider, like Andre 3000 says. It's not a big cost associated. And to be really honest, when you're talking to artists or concert promoters or venues, really what it boils down to for them is money. Right. And if you are providing access to a group of people, you are inviting more patrons in. It's not like you're going to lose money. Like, I don't understand why people don't understand that concept. Be more inclusive, be more accessible, welcome everybody to the table. Let everybody have the opportunity to enjoy entertainment in all of its forms, and make it accessible for everyone. We shouldn't have to ask for an interpreter to be there. An interpreter should just be provided.
Right, and not just one night a week, like one night
Not
of the
just one night.
concert. So maybe that's the night that you need it, and maybe that's the night that you don't need it. I mean, that seems like a no-brainer to me, that you would just have it all the time. But obviously, there's parts in the films when that hasn't been the case. But
Correct.
it sounds like there are people out there, trying with festival promoters that are, understanding that how important this is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then the other thing I thought was so great was how having an interpreter there also enriches the performance of the person who is performing, the band, the comic, the in the theater. Like, the theater one was, I was like, how do you do the theater? That one seems very difficult, but yeah.
Julie, if you want to.
Yeah, for an interpreter, it's really not one size fits all. So it's really important to be sure that, yes, you need to have a qualified interpreter who has the skill to do it, but also an interpreter that understands the entertainer, the show, the music. I mean, rap is very different to understand, than some sort of like Madonna concert, for example, or maybe Waka Flocka Flame. He's very different than Madonna, so, or even different than other rappers. So it's very important that an interpreter understands the specific genre or milieu of the person that is performing, and they're able to match that at the same level. You know, there are some interpreters that I prefer for an academic type thing, and then another that I would prefer for a social event, and then another interpreter I would prefer for an entertainment type venue. And even in that entertainment world, there are different interpreters that have different levels of expertise for something like theater or music. So it's not that you can just find, oh, I've got a qualified certified interpreter, I'm just going to put them on the stage all the time. It's not that one size fits all. It's really the culture of the artists themselves and the show.
Yeah, that definitely came across um, in the film, and that how necessary that is too, and how it seems to be happening more and more. At least that's my hope. I mean, the thing about this film is it felt extremely hopeful to me, that we're on the right track, you know, to hopefully having this not be a conversation we need to be having as much in the future, you know.
Yeah, I hope one day this film is obsolete, that there's no need for this to be out anymore because there is access, open access.
Right. What kind of brings me, Julie, also to the ADA that you talked about in 1992. And speaking of interpretation, people interpret what that law is however they want to, it seems like. You know, venues will say, yes, we need to provide it, but this is how we're going to do it. And we're meeting that criteria right here, but it's really not a fulfilling one for the people that are there. Yeah, checking the box, right?
Yes, they're just checking their boxes.
Yeah. And have there been any additions or more specific things where it's kind of narrowing that interpretation down?
Just one moment, please. I'm having a technical difficulty. This is Julie.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I'm sorry. Could you just repeat your question, please?
Yes, I was wondering if there's been any sort of amendments to the law within, you know, since 1992 that helps, you know, narrow the interpretation.
There have not been any amendments. The Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, was really an amazing thing to happen in our history. But unfortunately, people like to interpret that law for their greatest benefit, as you were saying. And there was a lot of kind of avoiding accountability and skirting responsibility through those interpretations. But really, we need to think about, yes, there is the letter of the law, and we back up need to think about the spirit of the law. And what is the spirit of the law? That each deaf or disabled person has an accommodation that is truly providing an equitable experience, and not the other way around, where as a hearing person or an able-bodied person is able to provide access easily, it is in fact the opposite of that. The spirit of the law is to make sure that the user, the patron, the person is able to have their true experience on an equitable level. So for a deaf person, what interpreter they would prefer, or the type of interpreter they would prefer for a specific experience. You know, and like I said before, you know, interpreters aren't one size fit all, neither are deaf people. So everyone is different.
Right. So that's why they want clients to meet with their interpreter so they can express what I'm going to need at that time, and then you can find a good fit. And it sounds like there are all those interpreters out there, or does there need to be more, you know, people being able to do that? I mean, is there a shortage of interpreters, I guess is the question.
I'm not sure how to answer that. I could give an example of trying to acquire an interpreter for even just an interview such as this, not particularly this one, but sometimes it is a struggle, especially if a deaf person has an interpreter that they've worked with. Like Julie said, that she has some interpreters that she prefers for an educational setting or a social setting. And maybe those exact interpreters aren't available. And then you kind of have to like reach out to your network. Just, I think, you know, like with any event, whether you're hearing or deaf and there's someone that you want to work with, I don't think that there could ever be enough interpreters or just enough people that know sign language. I mean, maybe they're not an interpreter, but maybe someone knows sign and could be of assistance and build a bridge between the deaf and hearing communities at any given point in time. But yeah, I would encourage anyone to go into the role of being an interpreter to get the education and to get the experience that you would need to be able to provide access to the community.
And I just also like to add to what Kat was just saying is that it's really about imperative relationship building, and there's not a lot of opportunities for the interpreters to be on stage, or maybe once those opportunities become more available, I believe the interpreters will come to, and the training will come to, and then we'll have more of this opportunity to pick what interpreter has an expertise in what area. So it's about having the opportunity and creating these relationships. And like Kat was saying, this is a building experience. This is a situation where we're building capacity. I mean, we don't have full access right now, so the capacity isn't there yet either. So at a time and place when the opportunity for access, the paradigm, the minds come open and the hearts become open to this type of access for everyone, they'll be hiring more interpreters. So then capacity will be greater, therefore resources will then grow. So it's kind of a critical mass situation of both perspectives of that coin.
Oh, great. Well, let's hope that that's exactly the direction that we're going in. So, so that really was one of my last questions is, where do you want to go from here? It sounds like we've kind of answered that, but do you want to add anything to what we've talked about going forward?
Julie, do you want to take the lead on this?
Yeah, I think that Kat's film is really elevating a lot of deaf people's real life experiences, this tangible moment in their life, things that they're dealing with on a daily basis, struggling just to get access, struggling to have enjoyment that other people don't have to struggle to do. I mean, even, in their own homes, parents were told by the doctors, don't sign, don't sign. And then many of us deaf people didn't have access to our own families in our home. Can you imagine that? Like that type of enjoyment, education then became a challenge because we didn't have any access from birth to 5. And then that challenge just kind of rolls into middle school, high school, and then college. So I really feel like this film is part of showing a deaf person's life, an experience, a lack of access, a gap that we really don't have access to our own language. And you see a whole bunch of different kinds of deaf people in this film, some that are hard of hearing, some that speak, some that use sign language as their only mode of communication. There's all different kinds of people in it. And there's one thing that's common among them is that they're all frustrated at the lack of access that society is providing. So it's really important for the viewer of this film to look at the film and say, wow, in the field of entertainment, what's going on? But then back up and see the bigger picture here. What's happening in these people's homes? What's happening to these people when they were children? And what was their experience growing up and, taking that step moving forward? So it's more of this omnipresent global conversation that we really, need to think about, and that people have been withheld from their natural language. And I just have to say that I'd like to give a big kudos to Kat for bringing a spotlight to this issue and this dilemma that deaf people face, that we do need to spotlight it more and more and realize that, yes, there is a problem there. We do have a solution, and we just need to develop those solutions collaboratively, and we have allies like Kat herself that are fighting to make language access and cultural access more of an everyday thing. So big kudos to Kat.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you all so much.
Can I give some love to Julie?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, this film would not be possible without the contributions of Julie and Matt Maxey and Joshua Castile and Trishelle Edmonds and Ken Arcia, like everybody in the film that allowed me into their life to be able to show this and to highlight the struggle and to talk about accessibility, not only to art, but to everything, to life. And so, I adore Julie. She knows this, but, it's always nice to be able to publicly thank her for the work that she does, not just for me in the film, but in her everyday life with Lead K and Deaf Hope.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I there were so many amazing people in this film, and I'm really happy to have had them, you know, telling us their stories, which is fantastic. And I hope that this keeps moving on and with a lot of momentum, which I feel like it's going to.
Thank
So
you.
thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so very much. It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks, guys.